All right, let's talk about one of England's most, well, intense kings, Edward I. This is a guy known by a lot of names. Some of them paint him as a visionary, and others, well, they paint him as a total brute. So, let's get right into it.
You know, the first thing you have to understand about Edward isn't some law he passed or a battle he won. It's the man himself. He was, for his time, a literal giant. Standing at 6'2", he would have just towered over everybody. That's where he gets the nickname Longshanks. Just imagine that physical presence. It's an instant symbol of power before he's even said a single word.
But here's the thing about his legacy. It's completely split in two. I mean, on one hand, you've got people calling him the English Justinian, this brilliant, forward-thinking administrator who basically built the foundations for English law and even Parliament. But then, on the other hand, he's the Hammer of the Scots, a totally ruthless warlord who just waged these savage campaigns of conquest. So which one is it? Is he the builder or is he the breaker? That's really the big question we're tackling today.
To figure that out, we've got to go back. We need to look at the man behind the hammer and the pretty brutal world that made him who he was.
Edward's early life? It was basically a trial by fire. His dad, King Henry III, was, let's just say, he wasn't the strongest king. So Edward gets thrown right into the middle of this chaotic civil war against these rebellious barons. He fights, he gets captured, he's even held hostage. But then he escapes and leads the royal army to a pretty bloody victory. After all that, he heads off on a crusade to the Holy Land. And get this, it's on the long trip home that he finds out his father is dead and he is now the King of England. I mean, can you imagine? These experiences just forged this ruler who was deeply religious, totally battle-hardened, and absolutely obsessed with making sure royal power would never crumble like that again.
Okay, so this battle-tested crusader finally makes it back to England to take the throne. And his first war, it's not against France or Scotland. Nope, it's a war against the chaos and corruption festering in his very own kingdom. And what's so cool about this is how methodical he was. He didn't just storm in and start barking orders. No. First, he investigated. He launched this massive nationwide inquiry called the 100 Rolls to figure out exactly who was abusing their power. Then, he challenged them. He started these quo warranto proceedings, which basically meant he went to the nobles and said, "Prove it. By what warrant do you hold this power? Show me the receipts." And only then, after all that groundwork, did he legislate, creating a whole new set of laws to lock down his authority for good. And this right here is why he gets that fancy English Justinian nickname. He unleashes this flood of major laws, these great statutes that touch on, well, everything. They put limits on what feudal lords could do, they expanded the king's justice system, they even sorted out land disputes and local policing. This wasn't just some minor tinkering with the system. This was him building the very bedrock of English common law.
And then, in 1295, he does something truly game-changing. He calls together what history now calls the Model Parliament. And for the first time ever, it wasn't just the usual suspects, the lords and the bishops. He also summoned knights from all the different counties and regular townsfolk. And here's the kicker. He gave them plena potestas. That's Latin for full power. The full power to agree, or not agree, to new taxes on behalf of everyone they represented. Why is this so huge? Because it set the precedent that a king couldn't just take your money. He needed your consent. That's a massive step towards the kind of government we see today.
But Edward's grand vision of a perfectly ordered kingdom, well, it didn't just stop at the English border. For him, order meant control. And control, for a man like Edward, meant one thing: conquest. His first target? Wales. The whole thing went down in two pretty brutal stages. First, in 1277, he basically marches in and forces the Welsh prince, Llewellyn ap Gruffudd, to bend the knee. But when the Welsh rise up again in 1282, Edward comes back with an absolutely overwhelming force. This time, there's no treaty, no negotiation. Llewellyn is killed in a skirmish, and his brother Dafydd is captured and then, well, he's gruesomely executed as a traitor. And just like that, the independent nation of Wales was gone.
See, Edward didn't just conquer Wales. He was systematic. He wanted to make sure it stayed conquered. So first he builds this iron ring of castles. These were the most advanced, high-tech fortresses in all of Europe, designed to intimidate and control. Then he starts planting new towns and fills them with English settlers. And if you were Welsh, you were often barred from even living inside the town walls. And finally, the legal blow. The Statute of Rhuddlan imposes English law and wipes out the Welsh legal system. It was a military, demographic, and legal subjugation, all at once.
With Wales under his heel, his eyes turn north, to Scotland. And you won't believe the opportunity that just falls into his lap. In 1290, the Scottish royal line dies out. And suddenly, there's a huge crisis over who should be king. So the Scottish lords ask Edward to step in and act as a neutral judge. He says sure, but on one condition. He demanded that every single one of them first recognize him, the King of England, as the feudal overlord of Scotland. I mean, what a brilliant, ruthless power play.
Well, eventually the Scots realized what was happening and tried to push back by making an alliance with France. Bad move. In 1296, Edward invades. He absolutely crushes their army, sacks the town of Berwick, and kicks their new king off the throne. But then he does something deeply symbolic. He goes and takes the Stone of Destiny. This is the sacred stone that Scottish kings have been crowned on for centuries, and he literally drags it all the way back to Westminster Abbey in London. The message could not have been clearer. Scotland belongs to me now.
But all of this incredible ambition, building these massive castles, reforming an entire legal system, and waging constant, grinding war, it all came with a staggering price tag, a price paid by his people, and, as we'll see, through some of the darkest actions of his entire reign.
Just look at the financial pressure he put on the country. In the first 2 decades of his reign, he asked for 3 big national taxes. That's it. But then, in the heat of his wars in the 1290s, he demands 4 of those taxes in just 4 years. The kingdom was being bled dry, pushed right to the breaking point.
You can feel the tension cracking in his relationship with his own nobles. This one famous fiery exchange just says it all. Edward orders a powerful earl to go fight for him in France, and the earl refuses. Edward absolutely loses it, yelling, "By God, Sir Earl, either go or hang." But the earl, completely fed up, just fires right back. "By that same oath, O king, I shall neither go nor hang." Wow, that is a full-blown constitutional crisis just waiting to happen.
Edward's desperate need for cash also led him down a much, much darker road, and he started by targeting England's Jewish population. In 1275, he passed this thing called the Statute of the Jewry. It outlawed usury, lending money at interest, which was the primary economic role that Jewish people were allowed to have. He essentially destroyed the economic foundation of their entire community in one fell swoop.
And then came the year 1290.
That year, in return for Parliament giving him a huge pile of cash and taxes, Edward issued the Edict of Expulsion. He formally and officially expelled every single Jewish person from the Kingdom of England. This wasn't a temporary thing. This was the first ever national, permanent expulsion of Jews in all of European history. It was a truly chilling act of state-sponsored persecution, and a policy that wouldn't be reversed for over 350 years.
So, after all that, how on earth do you balance the scales of a legacy like Edward's? The visionary lawmaker versus the ruthless conqueror and persecutor. I mean, the contrast is it's stark, isn't it? On one side, yes, he restored royal authority, he reformed the entire body of English common law, and he established Parliament as a real working institution. But on the other side, he waged a ruthless conquest of Wales, a brutal and seemingly endless war in Scotland, and he persecuted and expelled an entire religious community just for political and financial gain. He was, without a doubt, an architect of the English state, but you have to admit its foundations were often laid with violence and intolerance.
It feels so fitting, then, that Edward died exactly as he lived. He was on the march again, heading north in 1307 for yet another invasion of Scotland, this time to crush the rebellion led by the famous Robert the Bruce. And the simple words later carved on his tomb really serve as his final epitaph and a final, ominous order. Hammer of the Scots, keep the troth. It was a command to his son and to all of England to finish the war that he had started.
There is no question that Edward Longshanks built a kingdom and forged a nation. But the question that really echoes down through the centuries is, at what cost? His actions in Wales and Scotland created hatreds that would simmer and burn for hundreds of years. And that final charge on his tomb to keep the troth, whether his successors could or even should have obeyed that command, is a question that would go on to shape the destiny of Britain for the next 4 centuries.